Hey, everybody. Welcome to our regularly scheduled get-together twice a month to talk about research updates that have to do with lipedema. I'm so glad to be here with you today. And please put yourself, make something in the comments. Sandra already has. Just like to know you're here and where you are in the world. So lovely to know that. But I'm Leslyn Keith. I am the Director of Research and the President of the Board for the Lipedema Project. And I like to get together with you at least twice a month to talk about what's new and coming up with research that has to do with lipedema. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different because one of the papers that I'm looking at is not super recent. It's from 2018, but then I'm also going to be looking at a book. And because May is Mother's Day is part of May, and we like to honor mothers, I thought we could revisit our topic about lipedema perhaps being the mother of our species and some of the reasons, the evidence for that. And so the book and the paper I'm going to be talking about today both pertain to that. But one thing I would like to, let's do a couple of term definitions, because we're going to be talking about evolutionary biology. And so I just looked up the definition of this out of just the dictionary, and it says a discipline of biology concerned with the processes and patterns of biological evolution, especially in relation to diversity of the organisms and how they change over time. So evolutionary biology looks at how we adapt to our environment and how we change over time. And it's a tremendously slow process. And so what we're going to be talking about today is actually an evolutionary mismatch. And this is a concept that where a previously advantageous trait may become maladaptive due to a change in the environment, especially when the environmental change is rapid. So however we adapted, our biology adapted, it can't keep up with a rapid change. And then what happens? It becomes maladaptive. That one I got out of Wikipedia. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about, I just found this book. It's Lipedema, an evolutionary mismatch. So remember, we're talking about that our biology hasn't been able to keep up with a change. And so that's what the author, Ahmet Karacaoğlan, he is a Turkish plastic surgeon. He does liposuction surgeries on lipedema in Turkey. And he wrote this book, he said, during the lockdowns. So he was much less busy. He had more time to devote to, I guess, some ideas he already had in his head. And so he wrote this then, and it was published in May of 2023. And so just the synopsis of the book that I saw on Amazon, it says, Dr. Karacaoğlan presents archaeological evidence that lipedema is an evolutionary mismatch, which dates back to the agricultural revolution. He then goes on to share with readers how a modern adaptation of the hunter-gatherer lifestyle may be best treatment for lipedema. So what Dr. Karacaoğlan is explaining is that propensity for storing fat in the lower body in certain females, it may have actually enabled, and we've talked about this before, but it may have enabled the human species to survive because of that ability to survive during famines. So females with that classic lipedema shape, they had large hips, large thighs, probably large upper arms as well. They actually became symbols of fertility in many of the prehistoric cultures. So that body shape was revered because these were the females that were still able to reproduce and care for their young. They survived, whereas others maybe didn't. And then it said, Dr. Karacaoğlan said that your genes are not very visible to anybody, but that lipedema shape was very visible, and that shape became very attractive to males. These are the ones that they wanted for to be the mothers of their children. So it became actually the beauty ideal in many cultures in prehistoric times. So let's go now a little bit to an article I want to share with you, and that is Lipedema, Friend and Foe. And this was published in Hormone Molecular Biology and Clinical Investigation in 2018. So not super recent, but it had some interesting stuff in here. It definitely talked about that that the lipedema biology may have been very adaptive in prehistoric times. But the other thing they talked about in this paper was, let's look at those possible upsides of lipedema that seem to persist now in modern times. They talked about, the faux part of lipedema, that there's definitely some very detrimental symptoms that you can really reduce the quality of life, but there seem to be some upsides. And I thought it was interesting, the ones that they talked about. Some you might be familiar with already. For instance, biomarkers of health. Patients with lipedema tend to be a low risk for diabetes, for insulin resistance, for hypertension, and for cardiovascular disease. And they tend to have a normal lipid panel. And these types of things are usually not good if you have a high BMI. Patients with lipedema tend to have a high BMI, but they still have all these markers of health, generally speaking. Another one that they talked about as a possible upside of lipedema was a special affinity for water, because lipedema fat and just fat in general offers wonderful buoyancy. So this can make activities on water not only much more safe, but maybe even pleasurable. So I thought that was an interesting upside to talk about. They did say that if you really wanted to dive down deep into the water, it may not be so much of an upside because it's harder to dive deep. Then they had a couple of things that to me seem to reflect patients with lipedema have exemplary inner and outer beauty. And that speaks to what we're talking about prehistorically, that the lipedema-shaped female was the beauty ideal. And so, but what they talked about in this article was that women with lipedema have developed compassion, that inner beauty, for people who are overweight and obese because of their own struggles with weight loss. And this compassion is particularly important in a society that is rife with anti-fat bias. And they also talked about that women with lipedema talking about themselves, that they felt like they have fewer wrinkles and a more youthful face than women without lipedema. So they took that as an upside. So that inner and outer beauty. And also part of that health and that beauty is healthy skin. Interestingly, that we know that patients with lipedema tend to have hypermobility, can be very flexible, but going along with that flexibility, you can have very smooth and soft skin. And so it tend to be a more propensity in this group of having very soft, nice skin. And then lastly was a healthy lifestyle. And they talked about that patients with lipedema had a lifetime of trying to do what they could for their health. And they self-educated a lot about nutrition, about other healthy lifestyle practices, doing their best, trying to do their best for being healthy. And this is something that they now can pass on to their children or to their family. So especially if they have children who might be at risk for lipedema, this is information they can pass on because they have educated themselves to such a great deal. So very interesting that paper really talked about what they were calling the upsides of lipedema. But there apparently were quite a bit of upsides to lipedema. pre-agricultural revolution. And so let's talk about going back to the book now. And this is Ahmet Karacaoğlan's book. And he is talking about that biological adaptations occur over hundreds of thousands of years, that these adaptations, the changes in our DNA, and then changes on how it then presents itself in our bodies, happens over very slowly over a long time. But it doesn't adapt if you have wide scale change over a relatively short period of time. And so what scientists talk about is that when the agricultural revolution occurred about 10,000 years, 10,000 years is not enough time. So when I say it's slow, it's really slow. So we've had 10,000 years since we've had the agricultural revolution, but the lipedema genes have not adapted to that. And so this is when that first mismatch happened, because the humans gradually were abandoning a nomadic lifestyle, hunter and gatherer lifestyle. And then they became settled in communities where they began farming, both with animal and plant agriculture. But they were staying in one place, and a major crop gradually became wheat, was that staple. And so when we changed the way we ate and we changed our lifestyle, then this is when Dr. Karacaoğlan is saying this is when the mismatch happened and the lipedema body could not adapt to those changes. But Dr. Karacaoğlan says that besides that dietary change, going more to a wheat-based diet, he says that because these peoples no longer traveled about and they stayed in one place, they must have been less physically active. Now, for any of you that grew up on a farm, would you say that that is not a very arduous lifestyle? I'm going to say that farming can still be quite a physically demanding and very active lifestyle. So I'm doubting that was such a big change. And then he also asserts that because they were sedentary, that caused their metabolism to slow, and then the pathology of lipedema developed. And then they had decreased mobility, and then further slowing of the metabolism. I'm going to say that that's a little bit different. I do agree that this was a huge impact and probably was where the mismatch occurred. But I'm going to say that diet is a much more powerful driver of lipedema pathology than inactivity. So when they changed from a largely meat-based diet to a more of a grain-based diet, that led to a metabolic derangement. And that's where the evolutionary mismatch happened. So the first females that started developing this pathology, they first suffered from a diet-induced slowed metabolism. And this exacerbated their lipedema symptoms. So that excessive fat, the pain, all that kind of stuff. And they got even more fat deposition and inflammation. And then they became sedentary or more sedentary because of these symptoms. So not the other way around. He's saying sedentary first and then symptoms. And that's what caused the metabolic derangement. But I'm going to say it was probably induced more on the diet side. Okay, but then there was another hit. So 250 years ago, we had the Industrial Revolution. So there was lots of machines that were developed that made production of various things, including food, much easier and faster. And so again, Dr. Karacaoğlan says that because we had machines, we became less active. I'm going to say probably not the biggest problem. The biggest problem was that these machines could now mill flour. We could produce sugar at a much bigger rate. I mean, you had to grind with a hammer and a stone to grind your own wheat. You could only make a tiny bit of bread at a time. But now if you can go to a mill and buy pounds of flour, you can go and buy pounds of sugar. That has a huge impact on your diet. And so I think with the Industrial Revolution, that we took another hit to the diet that was especially hit hard on people that had that lipedema body shape and those genes. So Dr. Karacallalar is very much in the calories in, calories out camp. He believes that you're just eating too much and you're moving too little, and that has a bigger impact on you. I'm going to say it's more of what they ate and whether they were able to be mobile or not, or willing to be mobile or not. That had relatively little impact on what was happening. So the Industrial Revolution very much revolutionized our diet even more than the Agricultural Revolution. So, and we have no way of knowing how much lipedema there was, pathological lipedema, how much there was before the revolution, but it seems like there's been a race to increasingly more and more people impacted by lipedema since the Industrial Revolution. And really it was only coined in 1940. So, and the revolution had been going on for 175 years by then. So, so again, the same situation with the Industrial Revolution, that people with lipedema became less mobile because their symptoms were worse because of their diet. It wasn't that they got worse because they were less mobile. I just don't believe that. But this is part of the discussion, right? And so, but it really makes sense, as Dr. Karacallalar suggests, that going back to a Paleolithic diet. So people have heard of paleo, seems to be a little bit more carbs than ketogenic diets, but still a decreased carbohydrate intake and certainly no wheat and no sugar in that way of eating. It makes sense that that would help for the person who's diagnosed with lipedema. It would help their symptoms. So, and really it's astounding how many case studies and clinical trials there's been in the last 5 years, all showing that decreasing your carbs, cutting out wheat seems to be better for lipedema symptoms. And so it tells us that, you can't change your genes. These are what you're born with. These are the genes you have. You can't change that, but you might be able to change how your genes present, what kind of symptoms that you have, and the severity of those symptoms. And this gives us hope for those of you that are, your mothers, or you just have other family members and you see possibly that there might be some lipedema happening in other family members, or you're concerned about your daughters and your nieces. There may be something they can do. They may be able to change their future simply by changing what they eat. So that's pretty exciting. But I would encourage you to celebrate that if you are a person with lipedema, you are a member of that very important prehistoric group of women who allowed the human race to continue, because you are part of that group that survived and thrived and was able to bear young and have them grow and survive and thrive as well because of these lipedema genes that you have. So I would suggest that lipedema is the mother of our species, and you are a member of this very, very, very important group. So that is what I wanted to talk about today, but I'm gonna, I have a couple of announcements to share with you, but I'm quickly gonna go over to the comments and just see what people are saying. So we have the article and the book posted. Singit says, I must be an anomaly. I have high blood pressure and a higher A1C, but not diabetic or insulin resistance. My mom and dad did look younger than our age, and she also looked younger than their ages. So, and remember, this is just, it's not like all patients with lipedema have this profile. It just seems to be as a group that you have a less incidence, less of members of this group have diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stuff like that. So, but definitely there is members of the group that do have those issues, like yourself. But you do have one of the upsides of looking younger. And revered, hilarious husband did marry these hips. Yes, I mean, that was a beauty ideal. And it really was actually in the early part of the 1900s. You think of the body type of the celebrities and the movie stars and stuff like that. That's how they were shaped. Winetta says, I failed at my manifest destiny. Okay. Thank you guys all for being here with me today and talking about that. Now, just a couple of announcements, because we got something awesome coming up. Lipedema Awareness Month is June every year. And so this is coming up very soon. There's going to be lots of activities, lots of hopefully awareness happening. But at Lipedema Simplified and Lipedema Project, one of the things that we're doing is these heart-to-heart circles. And this is your opportunity to get together in small groups around the world in person. I think we'll probably still have a Zoom one too for people who can't make it. But please check the link below. We are adding new circles daily. So I think there's already probably at least a dozen listed up there on the site. And if you would like to host a small group at a cafe, a park, wherever you'd like to meet in your community, then contact us. Or if you want to find out where one is near you, contact us. So that's at support@lipedema-simplified.org. You can host it, or you can just know where the one is and let them know that you're going to be there. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to be face-to-face. And what's great is that last year we did this. The circles were very diverse in that we had people that found out the week before that they might have lipedema versus people that have been dealing with it for decades and are very versed in the resources and things you can do to manage it. So having all of these diverse people coming together and being able to share their stories, give and receive support was a wonderful thing. So please check this out and join us at one of those events. But just speaking about events coming up during Lipedema Awareness Month, be sure to check our calendar. And that's at lipedema-simplified.org/events-calendar. And when you go there, it will have posted if we're having a free webinar. For instance, I know that I'm doing one on June 25th about pain, doing that along with Brian, our CBD expert. And so there'll be several free webinars. And of course, it'll also have information posted there about those different in-person heart-to-heart circles. So be sure to check that out. And lastly, another resource that I really love for you to check out is our provider directory. So these are lists of providers around the world, and they might be surgeons, therapists, compression garment fitters, just all kinds of providers around the world. When you go to that page, you'll see a map, and you can zero into where you are on the map and see who's around you. Now, unfortunately, it's getting better, but unfortunately, providers for lipedema are still really sparse. So sometimes you need to travel. A lot of providers, since we had the lockdowns, have started doing virtual consultations. So that may be an option that's open to you if you can't find someone near you and you're not able to travel outside your area. So check that out and see who is around that can help you. Maybe you're trying to get a diagnosis. Maybe you've printed out our paper, a proposed framework for case definition of lipedema for research. Wonderful paper that can help your provider diagnose you with lipedema, or you want to go to someone who is already more familiar with lipedema. That's in our provider directory. So check that out. I am hoping that I covered everything I was supposed to let you know about. Going back to our comments, I think I got everybody who made comments. And Singit is thrilled with our free webinars. We always have plenty of those. So be sure and join us there. And so I always look forward to being with you. Unfortunately, because of all the activity that's happening in June, I will not be doing research updates in June, but I will be back on the first and third Thursday in July. Interestingly, the first Thursday happens to be July 4th. So join me on July 4th for the next research update. There's a lot of papers constantly coming out about lipedema. So I will have some more good stuff for you on that date, I promise. So until then, thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.